Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to call the October meeting of the Board of Early Education and Care to order. I want to start by thanking the entire Quincy team, led by Renee Collier, who I think here is in the room somewhere. Hi, Renee. Thank you and your team for hosting us today in your new office. It's great to be in company with all of you, and we're just happy to be here. As I reflected on last month's meeting and looked at our agenda today, I'd like to begin my remarks by expressing my gratitude to the board, EEC staff, providers, teachers, families, and advocacy groups for your ongoing dedication and hard work in supporting children, families, and educators across the Commonwealth. It is our collective work. I want to acknowledge that it's also a commitment, and it's taking a commitment from all of our partners at all levels to innovate and modernize, to pilot and try new things, to learn from those new things, all while prioritizing the day-to-day needs of children and families and continuing to deliver high-quality education and care and family and workforce supports. Today's meeting will continue to focus on several critical areas that highlight both our strategic priorities and the operational improvements we are striving toward. Our agenda today includes important discussions and decisions beginning with routine business. We'll then move to a discussion and vote on the support for career pathways and EC scholarships, which are critical investments in our workforce and reflect our commitment to elevating the early education profession. Additionally, we'll have a detailed review of our agency research agenda and key performance indicators. This work is fundamental to ensuring that our decision-making is data-driven and that we are transparent and accountable in measuring progress against our goals. And I also want to thank my fellow board members who participated in this work with the EEC team. Last, we will continue the conversation on child care financial assistance that we began last month, examining current caseload trends and the progress of the contracted provider procurement. It's a key area where we must continue to focus so that we can ensure accessibility, equity, and affordability across the Commonwealth. I look forward to today's discussions and to continue our work together as we make strides towards improving access, quality, and support for our early education system. With that, I will turn it over to the Secretary for his comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I intend to be brief this afternoon. Oh, everybody, there's already excited looks about that. I don't know how to take that. We continue to make progress with the interagency task force. The group continues to meet, in fact, even met this week to make headway. Nothing specific or different to update or to share today, other than the work continues in earnest, and we look forward to sharing more in the coming weeks. At the last meeting, we spent a good bit of time talking about, but also celebrating the monumental achievement of the updated procurement. Can hazard a guess that some folks saw or heard about the headlines, an annual investment of $402 million per year to purchase high-quality early education and out-of-school time care through approximately 19,000 contracted seats and more than 100 center-based and family child care programs for children who receive financial or eligible for financial assistance. Again, I want to commend Commissioner Kershaw, her team in general, and Tyrese Nicholas in particular for their extraordinary work and courage in taking on this work. For me, it all comes together when being in the presence of the very recipients of this evolution. We, Commissioner Kershaw, Tyrese Nicholas, Commissioner Miller of the Department of Children and Families, had that opportunity on Monday afternoon at Crayola campus in New Bedford. In total, we observed firsthand how the awarded contracts will make it easier for parents and caregivers, especially those with the highest needs, to access high-quality early education and care in their community. Is the contract scenario perfect? No, I don't know of one that is. It does, however, align with the agency's core values and notably reflects, as my friend and colleague Bob LePage would say, progress. Someone else knows Bob. That is all.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. I'll turn it over to the Commissioner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Mr. Secretary. I will just add my gratitude for having the opportunity to celebrate with Crean Campus and our colleagues at DCF, along with you, Secretary, and many members of the EEC team who made this possible. We will have time a little bit later in the agenda to talk about the procurement, but I did want to just add a sort of personal touch, having spent many years working at DCF prior to my time at DTA and then here back at EEC. I had time during those years at at DCF to really focus on what was needed for the kids involved with and the families involved with DCF. And so it is a meaningful moment to see these contracts come into fruition with the kind of supports that our families involved with DCF, our young parents, our families experiencing homelessness, and our low-income working families will have the supports to be able to get to programs, to have the services and quality they need at the programs, and for our providers to be recognized for the cost of care, or getting closer to the cost of care. So it's been a lumpy road a little bit to get to where we are, but I'm incredibly proud of the work that we've done, and we're looking forward to sharing more with you later in the agenda as well. I also want to welcome you to our new Quincy office. We are busy professionalizing the field at every level at EEC, and this is no exception. Our staff, who do really hard work across the Commonwealth, deserve the tools and the space they need to be able to do their work. We can open this space to the community, so our community members can also use it for trainings or meetings or coming together. We'll be able to use it for training new providers who are interested in coming into the early education and care field. So I'm really happy to be here. I want to offer my thanks to Renee Collier and Bridget, who's been hosting us, and welcome you all to join us back in the Quincy office anytime. We've also been upgrading our offices in Lawrence and Springfield, and you will no doubt have a chance to see some of those over the course of the year as well. I want to give a couple updates on some things that are happening, and we will be talking a little bit about the early education and care scholarships later in the agenda. But that program, which is jointly administered by EEC and the Board and Department of Higher Education, is open now for applications, and we've just extended the deadline to November 1st, so there's plenty of time left to apply for those of you who have not yet and are interested. As many of you know, over the last several years, we've done a lot, both changes to the application, changes to eligibility, changes to what degrees can be pursued through that scholarship. We've also done an incredible amount of outreach, hosting sessions in multiple languages, social media, to be able to increase the amount of students who are benefiting from that program and expenditures. So far this year, we already have 866 applications, which are up from 732 applicants in last year. So we're not done yet. So it's plenty of time to apply. Did I mention that? Total recipients already qualified at 554 for this year, and we're not done yet. And that's up from 419 total applicants paid in the entire of last year. So we were able to expend $3.8 million last year, which is up from 2.1 the year before. So we are heading progress. I would say that is progress. We are heading in the right direction to make those awards more, and part of the increase in funding is both that we are now paying for not just tuition, but also fees, and so we have more folks taking more courses and getting higher level awards to be able to advance their higher education. So really proud. Sarah Cian is here, Ellen Grandine, and Jocelyn Bowen. I want to thank you for your work on the scholarship programs, as well as in collaboration with our colleagues, Department of Higher Ed. And we have some exciting new collaborations to talk about a little bit later in the agenda as well. I'm also excited to announce that the applications for our capital grant programs are now open. And going from what was one a few years ago, we now have 4 capital grant program applications that are out. We have small capital grants for our nonprofit programs. We have large grants for our nonprofit programs, so those are over $1 million for large scale. We have a new program that we're running a second round for for-profits that are serving a high percentage of children receiving child care financial assistance in the small capital grant category. And for the very first time, we have a family child care capital grant program. So it's up to $2.5 million is available for this first round, so that we are working closely with Mass Development on how best to support our family child care providers. And as I understand it, we already have over 1,600 applications for that program. So I think there is high demand for supporting our family child care providers. So much of the support for this came from either funding that was provided in this year's fiscal budget, last year's fiscal budget, actually, and also through the governor's capital investment plan. So we are tackling quality and capacity on a number of angles, and making sure that children have healthy, safe, green, new, child-centered spaces to spend their day, and that work for our educators is a high priority for the agency, and it's pretty exciting to be able to see these programs come. And I want to just recognize Jose Mendez, who's been leading our capital grant work with excellence and distinction, and sometimes relentlessness, I would say. Also supported through the Governor's Capital Investment Plan is $12 million over 3 years, as many of the board members are aware, for a brand new child care financial assistance information technology system. And we are thrilled that the first round of funding, $3 million, we have an RFQ posted right now for vendors to apply for the first piece of that, which will be a family portal, as well as a case management system. So we already have a lot of interest in that too. I think just the Q&A period alone is open, and we have 136 questions and getting lots of emails about interest in that. So very excited to start that work and build a brand new system, which we know will be more modern, more flexible, will make it easier and more dignified for our families, as well as make it easier for our providers to do business with us. So we look forward to keeping you up to date as that process gets underway. In fairly short order, we will be also posting an RFQ for an educator portal, which is something that the board has prioritized in the agency for a number of years, allowing us to have a single point of entry for our educators, give the agency more data on how many educators are working in the field. And as we do that work in concert with the new credential, we'll be able to see where staff in the field are relative to the credential and the certifications that the agency will be updating and putting out. So a lot of exciting things happening on the IT front to continue our modernization and professionalization across the agency, and really focused on our users, as we've talked about, making sure that the user experience, whether it's a family or an educator or provider, is as easy as possible and as modern as possible. Many of you have had a chance to meet our new Deputy Commissioner for Field Operations, but he is officially on board now. So Joe Rucker is here. So Joe, thank you for joining us. Actually, Quincy is going to be his home office, but he'll be spending a lot of time across the state. So we officially welcome you to EEC. Joe is joining us from the Department of Children and Families, where he held a number of clinical and supervisory roles, most recently as the director for the Taunton area office. And Joe, we couldn't be more thrilled to welcome you to the EEC family and to have you on board doing this work with us. So welcome aboard. In November, the board meeting will be back in our Boston office on Milk Street. We anticipate being able to provide the board with an update on our cost work. The cost of care work has continued, and we'll be able to update you on that work as it has unfolded. We also have been in partnership, and you'll hear a little bit about this later, with Boston University and Brandeis, studying the impact of the rate increase that this board approved last year. So we're excited as we look forward to implementing a new rate increase in the coming year, what the impact of that rate increase was and the approach that we took. The board will also be discussing your FY26 budget recommendations to the Secretary at the November meeting. And finally, we hope to have an update on the Literacy Launch Initiative, which I know the board has been very focused on making sure we're doing our work around early literacy across the education continuum. So we'll be excited to share information about that effort as well. And that concludes my updates, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you for the updates. We're going to go with the theme of progress today.
Progress.
A lot of good stuff there. Thank you very much for the update. At this point, we're going to move to the public comment portion of the meeting. I'd like to call Michelle Hamowitz up to speak. I also want to acknowledge, as Michelle gets settled at the microphone, that the board has received public comment by email, and it's been distributed to the board prior to the start of the meeting. Michelle, welcome.
Thank you. Hello. Hello again. My name is Michelle Hamowitz. I'm the Executive Director of the Massachusetts Head Start Association. It's great to be back again today to testify regarding flexibilities allowed to states by the recent Child Care Development Fund final rule. For those paying attention, it's a different federal final rule that I was here to talk about last month. MHSA is a membership organization. We represent the 28 Head Start and Early Head Start programs in Massachusetts. Head Start's a federal grant program that provides early education and comprehensive child and family services to vulnerable children and families. Collectively, these 28 programs serve more than 10,000 children from birth to age 5 in Massachusetts. Head Start eligible children are among the most vulnerable in the Commonwealth, and Head Start services are provided at no cost to the family. 30% of Head Start children here in Massachusetts also receive a child care subsidy to supplement Head Start funding and provide comprehensive full-day, full-year care for eligible families. Earlier this year, the Administration for Children and Families released a final rule updating regulations for the Child Care Development Fund. The new policies included 2 critical updates that provide flexibility and opportunities for the reduction of administrative burden for Head Start programs and families. First, the rule allows states to waive all copays for eligible families with a child enrolled in Head Start or Early Head Start. We are so grateful to the department for the policy that already waives copays for all families earning under the federal poverty level, which does cover many Head Start families, and Head Start income eligibility sits at the federal poverty level. However, not all Head Start families fall under that waiver. The Federal Office of Head Start allows programs to enroll up to 35% of families between 100 and 130% of federal poverty level and up to 10% of families otherwise over income. Such families must meet the program's selection criteria to ensure that these families, though over 100% federal poverty level, meet Head Start's mandate to serve the most vulnerable families. This may include families experiencing domestic violence, children with significant disabilities, and other family circumstances. Additionally, recent Head Start policy changes have allowed for all families who receive SNAP food assistance to be categorically eligible for Head Start, and SNAP eligibility in Massachusetts is over the federal poverty level. Waiving copays would also reduce the administrative burden on these vulnerable families to pay their child care fees, even when those fees are very low. The second, the CCDF rule also allows states to simplify CCDF eligibility verification by allowing eligibility in other benefit programs, such as Head Start, to verify CCDF eligibility. As stated, Head Start families are among the most vulnerable and are very likely to already qualify for CCDF by income. Providing streamlined eligibility would reduce burden on families currently jumping through both federal and state hoops to access the care they need, and reduce burden for programs to get families services they need and that they're eligible for more easily. So we ask that the Board of EEC work with the talented department staff to exercise the federal flexibilities to waive copays for all families with children enrolled in Head Start and Early Head Start, and to allow Head Start services as an eligibility verification tool for CCDF. We're grateful for the ongoing partnership between Head Start programs and the department, and look forward to continuing to work together on these policy changes. Thank you.
Thanks, Michelle. Is anyone else here in the room here for public comment? All right, seeing none, we'll move to the last piece of routine business, which is the approval of September minutes. We have before us the minutes of the September 11, 2024 board meeting. I would like to propose an amendment to the minutes to reflect that Board Member Travers was in attendance at the September meeting. Are there any additional additions, corrections, or edits? Hearing none, I'd like to make a motion to approve the minutes of the September 11, 2024 board meeting. Can I have a second?
Second.
Second, Maria, thank you. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions?
Abstain.
Okay. And with that, the minutes are approved. Now we'll move on to our next agenda item.
Excellent,
Commissioner.
thank you. I'm going to invite Jocelyn Bowen and Erica Morin and Sarah Cian up. As the board members are aware, and as we discussed over the last several meetings, the FY25 budget included an additional $7.5 million for early childhood educator scholarships. It also included a reduction to our current and existing career pathways program from $10 million last year to $5 million this fiscal year. And we have talked about the work that the agency's been doing to make sure that we're building a strong pipeline of educators, that we're supporting higher education pathways and making higher education as accessible as possible. So I'm really pleased to turn the clicker over to the EEC team so that we can share a proposal for how we would like to support the use of new funds within the FY25 budget to fill some very important gaps and support additional educators to be able to access higher education. Jocelyn?
Thank you, Commissioner. So I'm not going to read the slide, and you've seen it before, but this is the budget language that is associated with the $7.5 million new investment for educator scholarships. And it does essentially require that we set up a scholarship program in partnership with DHE to support educators, and there are a number of provisions around the types of supports and who needs to be included that's in this language. In reviewing this, it seemed to us it made more sense, rather than setting up a new program, to make use of the programs that we already have. And as the commissioner mentioned, we had already been going through a process of reviewing sort of the areas of support that Career Pathways have been providing and the ways in which some of those supports have been filling a gap in other accessibility to other scholarship programs. So this seemed like an excellent moment to think about both how to use this funding and leverage the Career Pathways structure that we have, as well as think about how could we also invest in the current Early Educator Scholarship and make some minor changes that would be responsive to the expectations here and make it more responsive to new educators, which is one of the areas that it is written in the language that we should be. It's important this is accessible to. This is just a reminder. I think you've heard a lot.
Jocelyn, can I just jump in for one
Yeah,
more
sure.
second? So part of what we've talked about in the last couple of months, and we've been talking with our legislative colleagues and our colleagues at the Department of Higher Education, is that the reduction in the Career Pathways program that Jocelyn's going to talk about in a minute was anticipated to be covered by Mass Educate, or the Free Community College initiative that was implemented in this year's budget. But we have worked very closely with our Career Pathways colleagues to understand that many of the students and prospective students that are enrolled in our Career Pathways program are usually working full-time. Many of them have children, and often start with a single course or a 3-credit course. They may not enroll directly into higher education immediately, but what we've seen as a result of this program is that it's also often a pathway in for cohorts of students. So because Mass Educate requires students to be enrolled in two courses, many of our students that were enrolled in Career Pathways or are planning to enroll in Career Pathways wouldn't be eligible for that Free Community College. So we felt that it was really important to come up with a strategy to be able to make this program whole so we don't lose any progress with our existing educators and prospective educators who can benefit from Career Pathways. So just wanted to jump
Yeah,
that
no,
in
thank
before
you
you
for that.
before you talk a little bit about what the Career Pathways program does.
It's important context, I think, to understand where we're going. So this is a reminder again about Career Pathways. There are a number of support systems that Career Pathways funds at the community college level. Guidance and support for educators, including somebody providing advisement support, assistance with course selection, assistance in understanding sort of how you move through towards a degree, how to articulate towards a degree, as well as providing access to courses themselves and some of the materials needed for courses. And that was sort of the distinction that we started to make more clearly when we were working with the budget this year and looking at the current Career Pathways line at focusing those types of wraparound supports and then trying to have the access to courses go through other scholarship programs. But recognizing that there is a bridge that's missing for those that are really dipping their toe into higher education for the first time, and many of our educators fall in that category. They are required to take child growth and development in particular, and that actually is often a first step into higher education. And that's a space that Career Pathways has been really important in supporting new educators, but also supporting them in a way that helps them become comfortable with higher education and realize that this is actually something that they could potentially do, and support them in thinking about what the next step might look like. So one piece of our proposal is going to be taking some of the funding that we've been given in this year's budget and put it into that aspect of the Career Pathways funding for courses. So supporting educators that don't fit yet because they haven't matriculated, they're not yet ready to commit themselves to a heavier course load, in having that opportunity to engage with higher education with the supports to help them continue on. And then the Early Educator Scholarship Program is something that we do currently run jointly with the Department of Higher Education. It does pay in a typical scholarship structure. There's a per credit rate that's paid that varies by institution, but that's not, I think, a detail that's important for this conversation. And it funds up to a maximum of 3 courses per semester. Although I think recognizing that many of our educators don't carry a course load that's that heavy. It tends to be a lower course load. But it is a traditional scholarship program. It does require that one is matriculated. It requires that there's a 6-month work experience before one is eligible for this particular scholarship. So, moving on to our proposal. I'm actually going to go from the bottom up since I'm already talking about the scholarship. But one thing that we do propose is to work with the Department of Higher Education, and we are required by the budget language to work with the Board of Higher Education to do this, to adjust the scholarship requirement slightly to allow educators to be eligible for that scholarship without the 6-month work experience. We do also have to add in a priority for educators that are working in socially economically disadvantaged communities if we came to a position where the money was not enough to cover all the educators applying, which is not where we are now, though, as I think you heard the commissioner say, the numbers are growing again, and I think that demand is growing for that as well. On the career pathways side, we do want to sort of formalize the scholarship portion of the career pathways and focus it on educators who are taking their first course before degree matriculation. So the scholarship program still requires matriculation right now, but this would allow us to support those educators that I was talking about before that are really dipping their toe in and taking that first step to maintain that bridge to higher education. And I think we feel like these two investments really support us in focusing on that bridge in and using the infrastructure that we already have to build that bridge out. Any questions on that?
I mean, I'll just say thank you. I appreciate the commissioner's comments as well. I appreciate that the priority, I would like to see a priority of removing institutional barriers, obviously, for everyone to access college content while remaining flexible to accommodate the different path options. Not everybody wants to some people just wants to enter the field. Mm-hmm. Not everybody wants to do like, a complete college, 4-year degree option. So, we've seen that across the field. And I think, right now, actually, a lot of the programs also need people entering the field, and we have to make it as inviting as possible and as flexible as possible. I'm also very happy to see Urban College there because again, it's been a college that has been most accommodating in regards to languages, courses in other languages. Mm-hmm. I don't think there's anybody that interested without the intention of learning English, and I speak for personal experience, we all have a learning language, and I still learning Spanish a lot better than I do in English. So I feel like we need to recognize that a lot of the new incoming people in the field are most comfortable learning in their own native language. So again, in the end, it's going to help us all. It's going to strengthen the field, and the more flexible we stay, the better. I would love to also see how we're going to measure success, because again, considering that some people enter this program not with different goals, right? So like we need to document those at the beginning, because for success is going to look different for everybody.
And this is not today's conversation, but also for future conversations, calling out that point that you're making, that not everybody is committed and interested in necessarily pursuing a higher ed degree. That is something else that we're thinking about from the credentialing perspective. And right now you have to take that credit-bearing course to be certified in Massachusetts, but could we build a system where we're not requiring the sort of one-off course for people that aren't matriculating on, but thinking about alternatives that are more job embedded for those that just want to commit themselves to their job and to learn and grow on the job.
Thank you. No, and even that, just the fact that course is being offered in Spanish now, mm-hmm. And again, and encouraging the community colleges, including Urban, to offer more than that one college in more in the different native languages that exist within the field. Mm-hmm. It's going to make a difference as well, and maybe it will encourage more participants to pursue the actual degree.
Yeah, that's important.
Thank you. So Jennifer James Rice from North Shore Community College. I just wanted to echo Maria's point. The timing of this proposal is huge, and I had the opportunity to sit down with the faculty and the career pathways adjunct faculty that run those programs at North Shore to talk about the mechanics of could you really make Mass Educate cover what Pathways supports. And same conclusion as you're putting on the table, Pathways really meets that need of people working in the field now that are coming back, maybe really didn't want to go to college, but are coming back for those credentialing requirements. and they're not looking to commit to a degree program or enroll in multiple credit classes. So we have, I think, a well-oiled, integrated set of staff working together, but even through that conversation, I think there's a future opportunity to talk through how the application and matriculation processes work together to get to what you said, Jocelyn, about that, someday vision of these aligned credentials that maybe move between non-credit and credit and the amount of degree-bearing work. So just echoing how critical this vote is, as well as, frankly, the opportunity to kind of talk more about how Mass Educate can be an important new resource to grow the workforce. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Mr. Chairman, so picking up on both points, I think we have work to do to break down the barriers for those who do want to pursue higher education, whether it's through career pathways, and we need to maintain this program as such an important pathway in, and then continue to break down barriers to the 2-year degree and then the 4-year degree, and we recognize we have additional work to do with our partners in higher education at the institution level as well as at the board and department. And then to Maria's point, there's other supported pathways that we've been working on, whether it's registered apprenticeship programs or through our professional development centers, where I think we are in a position of needing to support anyone interested in coming into this field and meeting them where they are to get the credentialing and the certification they need to help support our workforce to grow. And then when we have them with us, helping them on their own path towards professional development in whatever way makes the most sense for them. So I think today's vote is really about making sure that we are filling gaps that we have identified in this fiscal year while we continue to try and make additional progress in breaking down barriers to those who are interested in joining the field and pursuing their sort of professional dreams in whatever way makes the most sense for them. So,
Thank you. I just want to extend thanks to the Board of Higher Education as well. This is nice to see a interagency within the Secretariat working together, and I think it actually, as I'm listening, reflects back on my opening comments about the commitment to learning, even ourselves, on kind of the intended and unintended consequences of some things, because we saw it in some of the testimony that was provided to us via email, is people were hearing that this program went away. Right? And so when we talk about the user experience, and if you're that teacher and you're experiencing that program and now you're hitting those, you maybe overcame the barriers and now you're hitting them again, I'm grateful for the partnership with the Board of Higher Ed and the work that you all have done to really center that teacher and that educator and that learner and how we can best, in the short term, address these barriers that people might be experiencing. And so I think we can say that the myth that this has gone away is not true. Is that correct?
well, we're making it whole for this year.
Right, no, I know, but I
While we
think
figure
that's
out, yes.
important, yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, but I think it's, again, that commitment to learning, Mass Educate, what does that do? How does that change things? How is, again, that user experience kind of centered in this? And appreciate the quick turnaround that you all have provided to address the short term, to make sure that we're keeping people whole this year, so.
So we have a motion.
Yeah.
So the motion is essentially what this last slide was, the one right before, that it's two parts, that we're taking this new scholarship money, which is the $7.5 million, and because the budget and these outside section language require us to work with the Board for Higher Ed, the motion is to bring this proposal to that board, essentially. And so the two parts of it are to take $5 million of this new scholarship money and put it towards career pathways to make it whole, and then use the remaining $2.5 million to go to the existing EC scholarship with some minor, as previously discussed, minor tweaks to what those eligibility requirements are. But those eligibility requirements largely are making it more open to more students. So we're not restricting it, we're making it more open.
Great. Any additional questions before I make a motion? All right, I would move that the Board of Early Education and Care, subject to revision by the Commissioner, approves the department's proposal to submit to the Board of Higher Education for its approval the use of $5 million for the new scholarship funds towards the existing Career Pathways program as modified to meet the eligibility requirements to comply with General Law, Chapter 15A, Section 19F, and the use of the remaining $2.5 million from the new scholarship funds towards the existing ECE scholarship program as modified to meet the eligibility requirements of General Law, Chapter 15A, Section 19F. Can I have
Second.
a second, Carolyn? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you to the team for your work, and to our partners in higher education. Yeah. The team working together.
That's right.
Right.
Love it.
Great, well, here comes the research team. So I invite Amy Checkaway and Ashley White and Adrienne Murphy up to talk a little bit. This is a very important and exciting milestone for the agency. And I just want to offer a couple comments to say that I feel like the board, during my time working with all of you, have been very eager for the agency to pursue data-driven decision-making and to bring on a regular basis data, information, analytics, and to have performance measures for ourselves as an agency. We've been working hard to build the capacity at the agency, and we have some incredible talent working in our research, data, and analytics division. And it was fun to see them all streaming in. Maybe you will recognize all of them as part of your presentation, which would be great. So we are fortunate to have a very now talented team. Our first ever research director with Ashley White, and many of you have heard from Adrienne Murphy, who drives our analytics and data decision-making, all under the deft leadership of Amy Checkaway. So it's a very important milestone for us to be able to come to you today with progress on research and data analytics. So for the first time, the agency has a research agenda, which is really looking at sort of the longer term and impacts. And we have some amazing research partnerships that Ashley is going to share with you. And then we're going to go a little bit lower down and talk a little bit about key performance indicators, something the board has asked us to develop and we've been working on for the last year, and some accompanying dashboards that can show where we are relative to those key performance indicators. Following the board meeting, we anticipate being able to post these publicly, which will make them accessible not only to us as an agency and how we do our work, but also to the greater public, our providers, our Head Start agencies, and others who may be able to use this data to drive their own understanding of the existing system and improvement efforts as well. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Amy.
Thank you, Commissioner. Just really thrilled to be here today to talk about something that we are really passionate about, which, as the Commissioner said, is really putting in place some foundational structures that we have developed to really help support agency data-driven decision-making. I think just offering on a personal front that I have worked in the early education and care research and evaluation space, mostly outside of state government, since 2001, when I actually first worked on a study for the former Office of Child Care Services on a federally funded study, and through also working with other states across the country, I think that I can say pretty confidently that Massachusetts, first of all, is a state, and EEC specifically is an agency that is really rich in terms of data. We are a data-rich agency. And we also have, I think, the agency and the field has really benefited over time from having really well-regarded research institutions and organizations, both in the state and outside of the state, engaged in studying different aspects of the system over time. But it is really exciting to be within EEC and state government to really help build both capacity and infrastructure with the goal of being even more intentional about the use of data and really accelerating the use of data and evidence in the years ahead. And so I keep seeing this work as a pathway. I don't know if I've talked about this before, and I feel like this is an important milestone, like a little ways up on the pathway, and there's exciting times ahead. And I think by putting in place these structures to start with, it's really also a way to help better engage the board, all of our stakeholders in the field, and prioritizing the questions that folks have that are of highest interest and trying to help support the work to answer those questions. So as the commissioners said, today we're going to be providing updates first on a new agency research agenda that lays out our key research priorities, or some of them, and questions, and really what we want to better understand about our investments, about our services, and the system as a whole moving forward. Just to speak a little bit on just the process of developing a research agenda, which Ashley will go into in more depth, and sometimes this is called a learning agenda, which I like as well. I think the process itself has just been really helpful in terms of starting to identify gaps in our knowledge base, identify places where, as Ashley will talk about, we already have ongoing research and evaluation partnerships, helping to foster an environment starting internally where, again, collecting evidence is valued, where we are thinking about testing our new approaches and initiatives that we're putting into place, and really trying to make adaptations in response to real-time learning. I think also figuring out the best way to partner together to do this work, both internally, but again, also externally. And I think this will also help us prioritize resources for, again, trying to answer the questions that are of highest interest. And then second, we will be talking about key performance indicators, or KPIs, to really help us start to measure now the extent to which we are making progress towards our strategic and operational goals. As Adrian will be sharing, really excited that we have developed some data dashboards to make the data more accessible and to really help us visualize these KPIs and metrics over time. I think just want to say, and I think this has been a helpful mindset for all of us, that we are both really proud of the work that has been done, but we also know that it's not perfect and it's not complete. But really excited again to put these things forward with a desire to really start to engage folks even more in the conversation and to improve over time. So I again want to thank the board for really encouraging us to consider and develop key performance indicators and metrics. I also want to recognize Commissioner Kershaw for your support and the value that you place on the use of data and research. I think there's a lot of folks who, most folks would say that they appreciate data, but it really matters who is sort of at the top, and you have really helped again, us both build capacity, but also space and time within the agency to be able to focus on this work. And I'm going to let Ashley and Adrian further recognize their teams. I'm excited that some of the folks can be here today, but I think before we turn to some of the details, what would be a board meeting without pulling up our strategic objectives? But
Until you have them all memorized.
Test Exactly. We might have changed. No, I'm just kidding. You will see that both the research agenda and the KPIs are aligned with the strategic objective. So again, I won't talk anymore about that, and I'm going to turn it first to Ashley to talk about the research agenda.
Ashley, can you just do me, guys, when you're speaking, can you move those microphones a little
Yes.
closer to you? Just so, yeah, thank you.
Hopefully this is better.
I think both, this is for the live stream, so
Okay.
good to speak into it so the people watching can hear. But there's also kind of a loud noise in the round, so good for you to project so everyone in the audience behind you can hear.
We'll use my deep voice to do so.
Yeah.
Thank you, Amy, and it's really wonderful to be here this afternoon with you all. Super, super excited to be able to share work that has been going on, I think, for the past year or so. And just second Amy's comments and thanking the commissioner and the board for encouraging us to engage in this work and dive deeper. And before I get going on the sort of goals of the research agenda, I just also want to recognize the research and data team. This has definitely been in partnership with the entire policy research and data division, and so a whole host of them behind me, and we'll talk a bit more about them, but just wanted to thank them as well as the various program staff that I and we all engaged over the last year or so. So in terms of the research agenda goals, I think hopefully they're outlined there for you all. But I think we really wanted to put out there in the world what the agency cares about, is interested in, is prioritizing in terms of research. We wanted to hear from the field about what they cared about and what they were interested in. And so this agenda represents that. And the purpose of that is to, I think, build intentional research partnerships and build meaningful partnerships dedicated to, answering those questions. We also wanted to align researchers and funders and stakeholders in the field behind what we believe and what we've heard are some of the most pressing issues in the field. And so the hope is that by putting this public document out there, folks understand what we believe are the most pressing issues and can help us tackle them together. As I think was mentioned by Amy and the commissioner, we have made a really concerted effort to build our research and data capacity, starting with, I think, or when I started, certainly in October in earnest. And developing this research agenda was really kind of one of the key goals at the beginning of that work. So again, just really proud and happy to be here with you all. This is meant to complement the KPIs, so you're going to hear from Adrian about our key performance indicators. And the research agenda is really meant to be, again, complementary of those and a really forward-looking document that outlines some, areas in which further research or further evidence is needed to answer some of these questions. I think, as I've mentioned, we all spent a lot of time with program teams, particularly Jocelyn's team that I want to call out, and folks internally. Certainly met with licensing teams as well to hear from them about what their interests are, what their priorities were, and had many, many conversations over time so that this document was representative of the entire agency and what we'd like to accomplish. The last thing I would or last two things I would say here is the research agenda represents questions that have ongoing research partnerships, but there's also a handful of questions that we don't have ongoing research partnerships with. And the purpose here is to hopefully meaningfully engage with folks on those questions. And then the last thing, this is really meant to be a living document. This is not final. And so we are going to, certainly would welcome all of your feedback, would welcome feedback from the field, would welcome feedback from other stakeholders and researchers as time goes on to make sure that this document is representative of the current policy context and the priorities of the agency. So I don't want to spend too much time here because I feel like I've touched upon most of it, but when I started back in October, I took a month or two to get adjusted to government life, meet my colleagues, learn from my colleagues, understand just the breadth of work that's happening at the agency. And then we kind of quickly got going in partnership with Adrian and Amy on developing this research agenda. And so again, met with a lot of program staff at EEC and also some external stakeholders to hear from them about what they cared about and what their priorities were. And then once we felt like we had a decent draft in hand, we shared that draft with EEC's executive team and EEC's advisory council. And the purpose of that was to seek feedback and continue to iterate on this. And again, making sure that we weren't missing anything or not prioritizing things that we should. And so we spent the preceding months after the spring and summer refining the agenda and trying to get it into better shape. And then more recently this fall, we also shared the agenda with the Research Advisory Council associated with the Education to Career Research and Data Hub. And for folks who may not know, that's the Research Advisory Council is a sort of group of advisors who are all experts in the education space and in research who are advising this Education to Career Hub, which is really meant to align and bring together all the education agencies to share data and research priorities. And so we sought their feedback, and they had some really wonderful, great things to provide us and integrate that as well. And now we're here in October publishing the research agenda. So the next steps are obviously to hopefully develop partnerships to answer these key questions. And again, continue to iterate on the agenda and make sure that it's relevant to the field. So before I dive in, just to share, I think as Amy mentioned, the research agenda is organized by strategic priority area. So we have questions for each strategic priority area at EEC. The slides here, the questions that we've sort of shared with you all today, this is not exhaustive, right? But we wanted to give you sort of a sample of the questions on the agenda. One that represent, again, some existing ongoing partnerships, so we can share more about that. But that also represents some questions where we don't have those partnerships, so that you can hear from us about our interests in developing those. So starting with the family access, I think as the board knows, and I think many people also know outside of EEC, for the past year, year plus, the family access team led by Therese has been making some critical, really, really important improvements to the CCFA system to make it easier for families to access, to make it more accessible. And so there's a few questions on the research agenda really dedicated to understanding the outcomes of that work and what the impact of that work has had on programs and families. And then I also just want to highlight this last question here about the supply and demand. It is not necessarily, we don't necessarily have a research partnership dedicated on this, but we have a partnership, thanks to the leadership of Adrian, with an organization called Third Sector Intelligence, 3SI, as we may have referred to them previously, which is really supporting us with our data infrastructure. So taking all of our data that we have and sort of using it together to create this powerful tool that we can use to answer some of the questions listed in that third bullet. So just wanted to highlight that really important partnership, because I think it represents that this is not only about building capacity externally, but also building capacity internally for research and data. So program stability is the next priority here. Obviously, this is a huge focus for the agency, particularly during and after the pandemic. C3 is clearly a really big part of program stability, and so you'll see a question that represents that there. But it's not the only part, and so there's a question here to just highlight that we also want to learn about other innovative ideas to support stable financing for programs. And then there's a question on here about the cost of care, as I think the commissioner had mentioned earlier. This is work that we have been doing for 2 years or so now, and looking forward to kind of keeping you all apprised in the months ahead about progress we've made recently. But that's a question that sort of represents that work as well. Did I miss one? Uh-oh. There is one slide missing, but that's okay. I will wait. Thank you. So the next one actually was workforce support. So obviously a really important a component of our work here. And we have some questions on the slide that's related to kind of understanding the workforce and their experiences and their characteristics. And we're actually also really fortunate to have a partnership with the Wheelock Educational Policy Center at BU to help us answer some of these key questions, which is really exciting, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. I also wanted to just highlight the early education and care staff pilot. Again, I think Therese and team have done some incredible work in regards to that. And I think we have heard from programs and we've heard from educators that it is an incredible tool in terms of retention and recruitment, but also economic mobility for families. But we wanted to really, I think, really kind of tangibly understand the impact of that program. And so we have a research partnership that has worked to kind of interview and connect with folks who have participated in that program so that we can better understand, their experiences and how it's helped them.
Sorry, we'll make sure the updated deck with this slide,
Sorry.
this very important slide, gets included. You can imagine what the slide production it might be like for the board meeting. So losing 1 out of 50.
The last thing here is program quality. So there's a question here at the top around, again, some ongoing work we're doing with early childhood support organizations. That work has been, I think, led by Jocelyn and Sarah Volkanot. So wanted to represent that work, which is really about understanding how quality supports in programs lead to kind of positive change in terms of quality and educator skill development. Mental health is obviously another really, really important area for the agency, certainly in and post pandemic. And so have a question related to how are the extent to which our current kind of mental health supports are supporting children and their mental health. And then the last question here I put on, because it is, again, I think indicative of some work internally going on, again, led by the great work of Adrian, to create these sort of cross-education agency partnerships and really kind of create data sharing agreements between EEC and between DESE to track children and their outcomes over time. And so we've got a question, this is one of a couple questions on the research agenda that really kind of point to that work, which is, I think, a really wonderful segue to how, again, we've been building internal capacity as well as external capacity to engage in research. And so, again, I joined the agency about a year ago. I've been very, very fortunate that earlier this summer I was able to hire Caroline Connolly as a research analyst on my team, and she's in the back of the room. Wave, Caroline. And she's just been an incredible addition to the team. And then also, again, with the leadership of Adrian, being able to bring on some research and data fellows in Virginia and Caitlin who are going to be dedicated to answering some of those sort of early education or educational outcomes for folks who have children who have participated in EEC programs. Virginia's in the back of the room. Caitlin was with us this summer, but is now working with us remotely. So I'm just very excited about the capacity that we've been able to add and all the research that's currently already ongoing. Which brings me to our existing partnerships. Just wanted to include this, I think, to give folks a sense of like the breadth and depth of research that's going on at the agency right now and how many partnerships we have. And I want to thank those folks for engaging with us and their expertise and their knowledge about the field and helping us learn and grow as an agency. And I think one of the things that we want to do, in addition to the agenda, I think bringing kind of research more transparently to the public, is build in some, I think, public deliverables within these research partnerships so that not only do we know what's going on with our research partnerships, but the outside world does as well and can learn from what we're learning from internally. So hopefully this gives you a sense. And again, I think there's going to be some opportunity in the months ahead for you all to learn about some of the research partnerships that we've highlighted here. And then next steps, I think I've probably said this a million times already, right? We're publicly sharing this. We want to spread awareness. We want to inspire engagement from folks outside of the agency. We want to really build meaningful and intentional partnerships to help address some of these questions. And we're going to continuously seek feedback from you all and seek feedback from the field and stakeholders to make sure that this agenda maintains its relevancy and its help in solving some of our challenges. So if you're interested in learning more, I'm happy to connect with folks offline and also happy to take questions before transitioning it to Adrian.
Why don't we open it up for any comments or questions before we transition?
I want to say that this is super exciting work. This is the opportunity to, not that we haven't proven that over and over again, but just to have documented the importance of early childhood education and the impact. I am especially excited about that one question you referred to with regards to the impact of early childhood education in elementary school outcomes. I've always thought CPPI is a great, it's a great opportunity to collect data. Those children do get SACIT numbers and we can actually follow them. And I can't wait. Thank you.
I just want to say thank you, because to me this is about leadership as well, and to the commissioner and to the secretary in order for the agency to prioritize this. When you think of just the arc of this department within just the last couple of years, we've gone from really nothing to a robust research agenda, and I think we're beginning to see how we connect all the dots and how all this stuff intersects, even thinking about Tyrese's presentation last week about how internally you all are prioritizing maybe infant care this time versus what we would have done 5 years ago, and making sure that we're asking those questions so that we're not just launching programs and launching pilots, but we're continuously learning from those. And did they exceed expectations? Did they not meet expectations? And how do we create that agility to make important decisions along the way versus just watching it go by? And so this to me is another example of just the leadership that this department's taking, but also the state is taking across the board as it works to prioritize this field and the learnings that are embedded in it for all of us. And so this is pretty good stuff. It's awesome.
Thanks.
I'd like to just jump in. I think this is stellar. Ashley, Caroline, Virginia, Caitlin, what a team. The fact that there are 4 of you is astounding. Congratulations, Amy. Congratulations, Commissioner. People in this day and age, I think that data it just happens, right? We get data all the time. And it doesn't just happen. It takes people, it takes infrastructure, and I am very excited to see this Commonwealth invest in that and invest in us learning and growing together. I'm excited to see this research agenda go public. That is a big deal. Having done a government-based research agenda of my own, you have done it in a much faster fashion than I could ever imagine. And I only talked to 11 people when I did mine. And so this is astounding. I'm excited for us all in this Commonwealth to be able to understand the questions that this government still has. This is hard work. We believe our government is supposed to be some mighty fortress that knows everything. And yet we're just human beings who are trying to figure it out as much as everybody else. And so for this government to say we are seeking other expert help in the form of our researchers, our data scientists, our designers, our public, who has vast experience with this, is an amazing feat, and it demonstrates that this is not a government thing, right? This is an us thing that we need to do. And so I'm very excited for this. Thank you for doing the work that you have done and the work you will do. And I'm also excited to see more than just our lovely fellow colleagues at Harvard step up and introduce more potentials for fellowship opportunities. I'd love to see my own university at Northeastern introduce some co-op opportunities, but this Commonwealth has more than, I can't even tell you how many colleges and universities exist here, and I would love to see those folks step up and introduce the opportunity to bring in new, young, excited, maybe not young also, researchers into this space.
Seasoned is good too.
Seasoned is also good, yes. And I'm just speaking from someone who, like, there are not that many of us who are excited about doing research in this space of early education and care that is applied and directly relevant to policy and practice. And so this is an amazing opportunity, not only for you, not only for the Commonwealth, but for us as researchers as well.
Thanks.
Any other comments or questions before we move to Adrian? Good?
Great. I'm going to try to channel my my middle school teacher voice today, which is not my natural inclination. So as Ashley and Amy both mentioned, we've been working now for really a year plus on developing a set of key performance indicators to help guide our work, and now some soon-to-be public-facing dashboards to display these key performance indicators. And I really could not be more excited to share with you all today a little bit about this work, get some feedback. But I'm lucky enough to sit up here and talk about this work, but want to be clear that it was truly a team effort from the steering committees across the agency who helped us design and develop the key performance indicators, to our IT partners who helped us make sure we had the right data and had the data right in the dashboard, to our partners on the for our IT partners, our partners on the product team who help us really think about the dashboard from a user experience perspective, and then to the data analytics team that I think is sitting in the back row crunching numbers maybe as we speak, and especially to Greg Chick, the analyst on our data analytics team, who was really responsible for the creation of these dashboards. I've said many times that these dashboards were an idea until he was hired this spring, and now they're a reality. So really excited to be able to share with you today.
Is Greg here?
He is. Thanks for not letting him.
I knew it was him because he kept his head down when
Yeah.
you were talking about it. Well deserved.
So when we set out to develop these key performance indicators, we really had 3 goals in mind. First, we wanted to identify a set of metrics that we could use to measure progress on EEC strategic priorities, really to sort of help us answer the question, are we moving the needle in the way that we want to be moving the needle? We also wanted to develop a set of data dashboards to support EEC, but also the broader community in using these metrics to track progress over time. And I'm excited to share some screenshots from those dashboards today and with plans to post them publicly later this month. And then finally, we just really want to increase transparency and access to these key performance indicators and other key agency data to make it easier for members of the public to understand what's going on at EEC and our EEC data. So I won't walk through this in a lot of detail, but we've been on a journey, and we've been on this journey for quite some time. So I think as some board members may remember, we first created a working group of this board back last summer to help work with key agency staff to really begin the development of our agency KPIs. And that group met throughout the summer of 2023 and then brought the results of that work to this board at last summer's summer retreat in the summer of 2023 to get feedback and input on the key performance indicators. We then took that work back to EEC's steering committees. We have a group of internal agency staff who are working on priority projects under each of our strategic priorities. That meets monthly, so we worked with those groups to sort of further define, refine the key performance indicators, and also have a conversation about then how we would actually measure the various key performance indicators with our EEC data. And then we did that through the winter and the spring. In the spring, we were able to expand our data analytics team, bring on Greg, and bring on just sort of more capacity to begin to actually execute on the dashboards themselves. And now we're at a point now, after much support from others throughout the agency and the Secretariat, to be able to bring the key performance indicators and metrics to you all today. So overall, the dashboard reflects indicators, as Ashley and Amy mentioned, that are organized under EEC's strategic objectives. And I'll walk through the key performance indicators under each strategic objective. I'll show some screenshots about what these look like on the dashboard, and then would love to have a sort of conversation and your feedback on the indicators. So to start, in regard to family access, the key performance indicators include data on the percent of all children who are enrolled in formal early education and care over time. So this includes children enrolled in our licensed family child care and center-based programs, as well as our EEC-funded public and private school programs. And then also data specifically on the percent of children who are under 50% SMI who participate in child care financial assistance over time. Both of these metrics come, as Ashley mentioned, from some work that we've been engaged in with our partners at Third Sector Intelligence, or 3SI, and the modeling that they've helped us do, putting together a host of EEC data sources, also publicly available data from DESE and other sources, to begin to understand the U.S. Census, to begin to understand our population and what proportion of that population is enrolled in informal care. The dashboard in regards to family access also includes data on our current caseload, broken down by funding source, children receiving vouchers or on EEC contracts, and by age group, as well as the length of the centralized EEC childcare financial assistance waitlist by region, age group, and over time. In regard to program stability, our key performance indicators in the dashboard reflect the capacity of our licensed and funded system over time, as well as the number of programs operating over time, and then also the number of programs opened and closed by month, so we can begin to see patterns in our field's growth, as well as the closure of programs over time. And in the workforce support space, the dashboard includes a lot of information on the workforce that we gather through C3, including the estimated size of the workforce for, as reported by folks who apply for C3 funds, as well as educator wages over time, some of those graphs that I think we've shown to this board over time about the changes in educator wages reported through C3 over time and by role. Currently, Just to note, the dashboard does not currently include a section on EEC's program quality strategic priority. Really, this is given the development of the sort of ongoing development of our system to support program quality, and we did seriously consider a few metrics in the program quality space, but it wasn't quite clear what the right indicators were in that space right now. And so we're certainly open to feedback and continued conversation as we continue to develop that portion of both our KPIs and our dashboard over time. Just a note sort of in the selection of those KPIs, we really prioritize 5 sort of criteria. In identifying the KPIs, we wanted to make sure that the KPIs were within our control, that they were something that if we notice it's not on track, do we have the right levers to do something about it? We wanted to make sure that the metrics were quantifiable with our current data. The list, believe it or not, was much longer until we sort of had to narrow down with what we are currently able to measure. We wanted to make sure the metrics were meaningful to the field, not something that we sort of use at EEC operationally, but that sort of had some meaning outside of the 4 walls of EEC, that they were realistic, that if we want to be tracking these monthly or quarterly or annually, are they metrics that we would realistically expect to change at a pace that they are meaningful to track? And then manageable in number. The list was very long, and we had to push ourselves to say, what are really the key performance indicators, and what are other operational metrics that we should be tracking and paying attention to, but not maybe elevating to the sort of level of being a key performance indicator. So I think we're pretty proud of the dashboard in its current state. So I'll walk you through a little bit of the metrics, excuse me, on the dashboard. You can see here, starting with program stability. So on the left side, you'll see graphs of, and I realize they're small here. They'll be much larger on the dashboard itself, but of our license capacity as a system, of our licensed and funded EEC programs over time, as well as the number of programs. And these are filterable by both program type. So you can look just at family child care programs or center-based programs, as well as by region. And then on the right, you see the graph. Again, I realize it may be a little hard to read. It's the number of newly licensed programs per month. That's the yellow bars on top. And then closed programs by month. This one is also filterable in the same way by program type and by region. So this will really help us be able to track and monitor not just the growth in capacity, but is that due to more programs opening, fewer programs closing, and to understand those trends over time.
I'll also just add that in the dashboards themselves, they are quite interactive, and so what you can't see on here is that, for example, if you hover over some of these bars, it's going to like pop up a tooltip. I've learned a lot, but just even more details, right, to make it easier to understand. So just want to note that there's even more here that is hard to show on a flat screen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks, Amy.
Sure.
The workforce support dashboard includes information on the left around the size of the workforce. So this is the number of educators, FTE educators that programs reported in their most recent C3 application. It's hard to see here, but it's 0 to 5 roles, and then after school and out of school time roles in blue, as well as the number of licensed FCCs and the number of licensed FCCs that report assistance. So this is our way of being able to gauge as best we can the size of the field, the number of educators through our C3 application data. And on the right, as I think we've talked to this board about, each month programs report the hourly wage of their highest and lowest paid employees by role. So this is a graph, those are graphs of that data over time. The sort of lighter colored shading represents the average highest and lowest wage over time, with the lines representing the sort of midpoint between those two. And then in the family access space, the dashboard, as I mentioned before, includes data on the proportion of all children statewide enrolled in formal early education and care, be that through our licensed center-based and family child care programs or funded public and private school programs. This data also includes public and private school preschool enrollment through DESE. And then also the proportion of children eligible for child care financial assistance who are receiving CCFA. Both of those are also interactive by age group as well. On the right, you can see data on the number of children on EEC's centralized child care financial assistance waitlist by region and over the last 6 months. And then at the bottom, data on EEC's child care financial assistance caseload, again, broken down by age group as well as funding source and the number of children receiving vouchers versus contract slots. So I'll just wrap up and then eager to get some feedback from this group. Our next steps really include posting these dashboards publicly. Our hope is to do that in mid-October, later this month. And then really to further refine the existing metrics. We've already been talking about this as Dashboard 1.0, and we've been talking about what will be part of Dashboard version 1.1 and 2.0. So I think we recognize that this is sort of a first bite at the apple and certainly not the last. So we want to build in some additional disaggregations, some other sort of user-focused enhancements to make the data even easier to digest and understand. We'll continue to update and maintain the dashboards, and then also excited to get input as the public begins to use these dashboards. We also want to continue to add additional metrics over time, so I think we already have some in mind for version 2.0, and as new data sources become available, also want to continue to add to these metrics over time. And then I think probably the most important part is then to actually start to use these metrics to drive our internal conversations for the steering committees within EEC to build these metrics into part of the sort of regular routine and start to think about how do we have meaningful conversations about whether or not the metrics are moving in the direction that we are hoping, and if not, why not, and what are we going to do to adjust course. So excited to get these live and to start this conversation. I've presented a lot of content, so I just want to open it up to conversations either about the metrics themselves or about the process for using these metrics to begin to continue to measure and gauge our progress.
Questions, comments from the board?
I just want to say yay. You know, I've been on this board for 5 years, and when I joined, we didn't even know how many children were being served every month. So, like, to be at this point where we have, like, publicly available dashboards about all these really important KPIs is just, like, so exciting, and we've just come such a long way, and you guys have just created so much in such a short amount of time. So just wanted to say kudos and thank you.
Team effort.
Yes,
a true
yes,
team
yes.
effort.
You broadly have created so much, and I'm just really looking forward to being able to nerd out a little bit and go through them myself, and then to use them here, you know, at the board meetings to, you know, think about where we should go next.
Like Nikki said, I can't wait to see it online and go live and play around with it. This is amazing. Great job.
Could I ask, thank you for the presentation, first of all. On the technology side, are you leveraging either directly through the agency or through your partnerships tools like artificial intelligence to help you with design of the dashboards, with the overall approach, and then inputting data to help, you know, give you a feedback loop on ways to make improvement?
It's a great question. We haven't been. The dashboards are created in Power BI. We have not used any sort of AI technology. I mean, we've frankly been using we've been working with our product team and doing some user interviews and really sort of like maybe old, I would say old-fashioned, sort of more traditional methods of getting stakeholder feedback. I hadn't thought about that. I know there are a few efforts in the sort of AI data space ongoing, and it's something that we certainly want to take back and think about what can we glean and learn, especially from that user-focused perspective.
I would encourage you to do it.
Yeah.
I think you know, the limitations are certainly there.
Yeah.
Like a tool like ChatGPT is
Yeah.
going to give you real-time data in Massachusetts that
Yeah.
feed your metrics.
Yeah.
It sounds like you're doing a lot of that on your own.
Yeah.
the tool can be really helpful in helping you think innovatively about design, either for the approaches that you're taking, how to use the data. You can even use the data itself to feed into some of these tools to help spit out some, different ways to approach how to utilize it. So I would encourage you to do it. There's free resources out there. You have to be mindful of its limitations, of course, but it can be really helpful and pretty user-friendly these days. So I'd encourage you to take a look.
Yeah, and also thinking on the other end about how is AI going to read what we're putting, like how are we, it's really helpful.
It might be interesting for us to see what AI tells us we should be thinking about.
Yeah, exactly.
Not that we will listen to that, because we will use some of the old school technologies too, but it will be interesting to see if it.
Yeah, and I'm happy to do an offline connect. Just because I've been using it and what I do for work, and I'm sure it could be helpful. And happy to do that offline.
Yeah, and I think really welcome any input too from the humans here, also about visualization or other ways. I know again we've sort of put forward a first pass at this, but there's certainly a lot of additional room for and again sort of both how to make the data most clear, but also I think just recognizing the power of visualization as well.
Certainly reflects the theme of the day, which is progress.
I stumbled into the break room by accident earlier and happened to run into some EEC staff who work here. And strangely and coolly, our conversation immediately went to how excited they are about these dashboards and the data infrastructure that exists, because they're excited to get the feedback and learn what they can improve. And so I'm excited to hear internal staff get excited about this nerd stuff as well. I'm curious about how often the data are updated. So what's the frequency with which you're pulling? Is it a live pull, or is it a quarterly, monthly update?
It varies for the various. Okay. The dashboard is updated as frequently as the underlying data that it pulls from are updated. So some are updated daily, some are on it. Some are also, in part because of the Child Care Financial Assistance billing cycle, on a lag. So I think the direct answer is it's complex because it depends on its sort of visualization to visualization, how often they're updated. But our goal is to update them as frequently as we can to keep the data, so maintain the data integrity, and also to get the data out there once it's sort of final and ready for the public.
It will reflect as the most current data we have, which sometimes is a C3 survey from 6 months ago, sometimes a certification from last month, sometimes the caseload as of the 6-week ago billing cycle. So it, not much, maybe the licensing data I think is real time, is the only thing that is probably
and it's,
actively real time.
Yeah, isn't it on a little bit of a lag because we show the data once the month has concluded, so we're not showing months still in process, but that's probably the most frequently updated, most current data on the dashboard.
And I think that makes sense. That's usual with any type of dashboard, especially ones that you're making public. You want to make sure that the data is clean and accurate before you produce it so that people can actually use it.
Yeah.
And I think the most important part alongside that is just to have especially with different data pieces, right? Like variables that you're telling the public, just so you know, this was updated at this frequency.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, we'll make sure that's all clearly
labeled.
Indicated, and that new child care financial assistance system we're going to have will bring us more into real-time data, at least in that world.
Connecting all the dots. I just want to say thank you for your leadership on this again. When we think about when this work started to where we are today, and I also the leadership is in being transparent about where the data is and putting it online, the data is going to tell a story, and there's going to be some days when we feel really good about that story, and there's going to be some days where we don't, which is why I love the intersection of the work that you're doing, Ashley, because this is really about a learning agenda and how we take that data and how we learn from it and how we evolve from it, make decisions and make priorities. And so just really excited to see where this goes, and I think can be a tool not only for this board, but for the community at large and legislators and others and policymakers to really think about, like, where are we as a system and where are the real-time numbers, and have access to them and transparency to them, I think is really powerful, especially from a government perspective. So really cool stuff.
I have a quick question. Will you be able to, these are great, will you be able to divide them by region as well, or for the public to see?
So the licensing data is filterable by region. Most of the family access, the kinder weight data here is already broken out by, so where possible, yes, and I think as we think about continuing to evolve the dashboard, I think if there are places where we aren't currently doing regional breakouts, but we can also certainly prioritize that as we think about version 1.1 and 2.0 and beyond.
I'm sure there's plenty of those.
Yeah.
Thank you.
What's your questions?
I just had an offer, and I agree, this is incredible. The dashboards are the foundation of information, so people have context. Shocking, I guess, not having had it for 5 years. But it also then makes people ask more questions, which is fun. And I'll be a data nerd plus a broken record about workforce issues. The question about whether people in the workforce progress, I think, is such an important area to think more about. And we were talking internally at our college about using our own data to understand that question. Do people who come into the Pathways program matriculate? Now, you could do that 15 different times, or you could do that in a more systemic approach and tap AIR's data or IPED's data and think about that. But I know we're interested in at least starting that question. So whether that becomes sort of a dashboard baseline or a larger strategic research agenda question, I don't know, but just food for thought, but not discounting the massive amount of work that's embedded in the work that's in front of us.
Yeah. Thanks. I think we've been thinking a little bit too about as we have more educator data through the educator portal, how are we thinking about incorporating some of that data here? And I realize it's a little different than what you were referring to, but I think the workforce support section feels like a place where there's lots of opportunity to continue to add and evolve. So.
And it does feel like we can build into the vendor work on the educator portal, engagement with our stakeholders about whether they're the trainers or educators of the educators or the educators themselves. I think we can build into the vendor work kind of engagement with what the questions are there.
Or even if you do it through the hub, the EC, the Cradle to Grave group at the state level, you take the portal data on licensure, you add it to IPEDS or AIRS, you have a different layer of perspective in on whether folks are actually growing over time. Yeah.
Interesting.
I would just add thanks to the folks in the field who feed a lot of this data to you all for us to have this conversation. And I know that, sometimes we've all been in our roles, regardless of our industry, where we get these surveys or we get C3 surveys or other information that we have to upload and we wonder what happens to it. I hope people now can see what's happening to it and that it will be an integral part of kind of decision making and prioritization and transparency to where we are as a field. So just a thank you to those people that aren't in this room right now that are feeding all of these sources on a very regular basis for us to be able to have this conversation and for you all to be able to do the work that you do.
100%.
I just want to reiterate that same. I had an interesting conversation with, I think it was about the C3 application, and it was probably a year ago at a program on the Cape. And she was saying, you really are asking a lot of us. She's like, but I don't mind because I see you using it. So I think that makes a big difference. And I think that this will make a huge difference for folks in being able to not just see individual programs, see we're using it in a in a slide in a board meeting, but they're going to be able to go and see it themselves. So I'm producing that data, and it's informing the directionality that the board's taking, or the field, or the agency, or other research groups too. So just want to add my thanks to this team and the rest of the team here. We are so fortunate to have you in service at EEC and to the Commonwealth, and we are definitely going to be a better agency, and I think we're going to be able to ask better questions. Not just have answers, but continue to ask more questions because of this data. And I know I speak for the rest of the teams in the agency, whether it's our licensing team, our background record check team, our family access team, that for them to be able to have this data and see what's happening is meaningful, because they can see the impact of their work and have a better sense of policy development and directionality. So thank you all very much.
I think this is a big piece of your puzzle to move to transform. Huge piece.
Absolutely.
So, thank you all so much. Thank you. With that, we're going to take a 5-10 minute break. All right.
That'd be really bad.
All right, welcome back. Commissioner, I'll hand it to you to introduce Tyrese for our, I believe, our last agenda item.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So we are going to conclude the meeting with a couple updates on childcare financial assistance. So I'm going to walk us through current caseload and trends, and then ask Tyrese to give you all an update on where we are on the procurement of our contracted provider services. So at last month's meeting, we had just made award announcements, and we were in the midst of contract negotiations, and we promised we were going to come back and give you some sort of where we landed details on that $402 million procurement. So I will turn it over to Tyrese. But let me start by just grounding us in the current child care financial assistance caseloads. And as all of you are aware, we pay for child care financial assistance in two different ways. So one is vouchers that are portable and go to the family. We work closely with our child care resource and referral agencies on the issuance of those vouchers. And then we also purchase child care financial assistance directly through contracts with providers. And the procurement that we did is in that direct space. So we're going to present you with a little bit of data about the current caseloads, and both Maria and Nikki have asked us to come back, and this is something that the data agenda is now enabling us to do, which is dig a little bit deeper. So I know we've talked about this from the budget perspective over the last couple of months, and both of you asked if we could come and present some current data about the caseloads, where we are, and what that currently means for families. So we essentially have the same caseload data presented in 6 different ways for you on these slides. So I'm going to walk through them at a high level, and if there are additional questions that folks have. I want to start by saying that there's a lot of dynamics in our caseload right now, perhaps more than we had anticipated. The first thing I want to say is that when you make it easier for families to access care, they do that. And that's the first thing that you're seeing in this caseload. I was at the Education Commission on the States conference recently, and I was with Oregon, and Oregon has gone through a similar reform process in their child care financial assistance system, and they said for years they'd been deferring funds, that they hadn't been able to serve everyone. They hadn't been able to even spend the dollars that had been allocated, which was the situation at EEC for a number of years. And then they went through a similar reform process where they made the application process, they broke down barriers, and they went from returning funds every year to a 7,000 person waiting list for child care financial assistance. So that is a very difficult story, but it is also a good story, and it is part of the story we have here, which is that we made it easier, we broke down barriers, and we saw a big increase in the number of families accessing care. We also made it easier for providers, and we have record numbers of providers who have now signed voucher agreements with the state, so additional access for families at places that they might not have before been able to access care. So we're seeing that in the caseload numbers as well. So I also want to remind everyone that through the budget, we talked a little bit about the current funding levels, which is about $872 million for child care financial assistance, which is essentially a level fund from last year. So to serve the number of kids that we have more kids in the system and about the same number of dollars in the current fiscal year. The governor had asked for $914 million through her budget, but ultimately in the final budget, we received $872. The other dynamic I wanted to mention is that, and it's related to making it easier, but we've been working really closely with our colleagues at DCF and DTA, and they have independently also been working to make it easier for child care access. I know there's been sort of an IT upgrade over at Department of Children and Families that's made it easier for social workers to refer families, and we are seeing a pretty significant increase in the DCF caseload for the first time in several years, which is great because there's more kids receiving access to early education and care, but also an increase, you see that in the caseload. On the DTA side, we're also seeing both their caseload in general has increased as income eligibility levels for DTA benefits have increased, and there were COVID-era pauses in work program requirements that have now been reinstated. And so we're seeing additional families from the DTA side who are participating in work-related activities and receiving referrals for childcare. So many of these dynamics were happening all kind of converging at the same time, I would say, over the spring. So we came to you in March and talked about sort of having had a target for the caseload, having hit that target in the caseload around March of last year. We put some controls in place to mitigate additional vouchers being issued at the same time that some of these other dynamics were happening in the caseload. So these are the trends that we're seeing right now. So this is by program type. So you can see the total caseload is represented at the top. And this is trends from July of 19 through July of 2024, which is really the most current caseload data. We will actually expect some of these numbers to come down a little bit because we have a number of summer-only school-age kids that come in over the summer. So generally, we see a dip in September as those kids go back to school and aren't accessing after-school care. So we'll be interested to follow these trends. The yellow line is our income-eligible caseload, and then the blue line is DCF, and the red line is DTA. So we track our caseload both by the populations that we're serving, and then we also track it by age group. So you can see on this slide the total caseload again at the top, and then school age, which is the largest population that we serve, preschool, infants, and toddlers, and then infants in blue at the bottom. So we also track it by the type of financial assistance. So you can see in red, this is our vouchers. Those are the portable that go directly to families, and then our contracts in blue. Just showing you the total caseload trend just over since July of 2023. So zooming in a little bit on the growth from 2023 through current day and the trend line there. You can see in March of 24 is when we put in those controls I talked about. So we were limiting access just to DTA and DCF families who always have immediate access. And it's still open for those populations as well as for continuity of care. So if a family already has child care financial assistance and they have a sibling born into the family, or someone is coming from a DCF space or coming from an income eligible, we make sure that there's always continuity of care so people don't lose access, which is, so vouchers are open to make sure that there's still continuity of care. But new families are not being enrolled from the voucher waiting list. This is just another look at the data, and I think in the numbers actually here you can see the significant increase for DCF and DTA a little bit better than you can in the charts. So we wanted to present, we all are different kinds of learners, so presenting the data in different ways. Again, just another look at the same caseload to be able to see the proportion, and this is back to population. So DCF in blue, DTA in red, and income eligible in yellow over time, with a little bit of a zoom in since July of 23. So the good news is we're serving 65,000 families. We're serving a significant increase back up beyond our pre-COVID caseload numbers, which we're really pleased with and where we were heading. But as a result, we've had to put in some limits on the number of families that can be enrolled from the waiting list. As I said, limited just to DCF and DTA families, as well as those continuity of care. So most families are not receiving access right now through our waiting list. So as a result, we've seen the waiting list grow. You can see we're up at about 28,000 families that are on the waiting list now, broken down by age group on the left-hand side of this chart for your reference. So sitting at the top of that waiting list is a lot of our early education and care staff. You'll remember that our pilot, which we turned into policy prioritize staff working in early education and care programs to be served from the top of the waiting list, and at a higher income level at 85%. So generally speaking, the waiting list data here reflects families who have identified themselves as interested in care. So they've called either our child care resource and referral agencies, they've called Mass 211, or they've identified themselves to a contracted provider as being interested and eligible. These are verbal confirmations of eligibility. This is not a placement list of families who we know today are eligible. So when funding becomes available, you're contacted when you're on the waiting list, and then eligibility is determined. So we can't confirm for you that there's 28,000 families who are eligible to receive care right now, but that's what is represented. The other thing I should mention is that this is still at the 50% of state median income and below. Again, not verified eligibility, but the outside section in the budget, which increased eligibility up to 85% of state median income, goes into effect in January. And so the team right now is looking at sort of the scope of work that would need to be done to increase eligibility, which would be, we have a regulatory change, we have IT, an information system, we have policy changes, all of which will need to go into place so that we can communicate and affect that change. But at current funding levels, we won't anticipate reopening the waiting list, even as we increase eligibility levels in policy effective in January to comply with the budget language.
So is the 28,376, that's families, so presumably.
Actually, it's children.
It's children. Okay.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question? And I, number one, appreciate how you teed this up, like, as we've talked about with a lot of this stuff, as we break down barriers and modernize systems and everything, whether it's us or DTA or DCF, like, you're gonna see an uptake in benefits that people are eligible for, and that's the right thing, right? But the consequence of that is there's a cost to it, and there's everything. My question is, again, centering the family that might be on this list, can I just clarify one thing you just said? Like, especially as we move to 85%, is there a way to do eligibility earlier? Like, just, do you know what I mean? Just so that, like, if I was on that list for 9 months to get a call to only then find out I wasn't even eligible, like, that's 9 months I just lost of possibly thinking about my experience for my child. Like, and so is there any consideration for that, just to try to sort that out a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, it is, Chair. So we incorporated a soft eligibility check. So any family who is being added to the wait list through Mass 211, we can in most instances be assured that they've gone through a soft eligibility check that assumes that they're eligible based on the information, the minimal information they provided, whether they were citizenship. It's very minimal though. But later on, they could be determined that they're not eligible. But we can't say that for all of the families. Now, our hope is when we get our new IT system, our family portal, that front door, we'll be able to do a real eligibility check for families coming on the wait list.
Yeah, just centering them in that, just knowing that, like, this is for me or not, just so I can plan accordingly within my own household or situation.
Well, I mean, eventually the plan, I mean, the current waiting list system, which is Kinder Wait, is very clunky and old, and so the information is not great. We wouldn't be able to do that through the current system right now. But one of the challenges, and Maria and her team could talk about this, is the age of the records on the not the people, the age of the records on the waiting list. I mean, one of the things we learned through the pilot was that when we made families who are staff working in early education and care programs eligible, and it was a very quick turnaround from the time that they contacted Mass 211, were added to the waiting list, the eligibility check was done, their records, they moved very quickly through the process because the information was very recent and current, so this data gets older and older for families on the waiting list every day. So, I mean, the dream, would be eventually it would be a placement list of eligible families that when funding was available, they could move to placement very quickly. So this will be something that we'll be working on through the design of the new family portal and child care financial assistance overall case management system. So that, I think there are a lot of folks who would say, like, why do a full eligibility check if I'm going to sit there for 2 years and I might get a new job? And so there'll be a balance between sort of how do we make sure the data is up to date and
Updated.
current and can be acted on quickly while not burdening families twice?
I'll be the first to be a pain to the research and analytics team here, but as we ask questions,
You
we
won't
use
be the
data
first,
to
so.
verify. But I just wonder, like, in a future state, in an innovative state with a new system and everything, if one of our benchmarks isn't, how long people sit on that, like, are we trying to push that
It's
down,
something
right?
we've been trying to figure out, yeah.
So.
That Adrian
It's a
will
hard
attest
question.
that was probably one of the ones that we pushed off because it didn't fall into the 5 criteria of it was in our control and we could get it. But it is because it's been something that has to be we have to be able to see how long people are waiting and what the characteristics or regions or what are keeping families for waiting longer or waiting shorter. That's something that we'll want to build into the new waitlist system when we build it for sure.
Well, I'll just say, one of my questions in terms of figuring out either financial availability and access, or access around financial availability, but also access around potential barriers that may exist that I'm not seeing, is just asking the R&Rs, in fact, okay, what are the dates, what's the date of entry of the families that we're sending letters of availability now? Like, they have to go in order of the wait list, so basically, different regions have different wait times, and it's like I usually ask, like, okay, what letters are we sending now? It's like, okay, we're sending letters to families that entered the wait list back in 2022 or 23 or January or February. So they send batches of letters as funding becomes available, and then for me that's an indicator of like, okay, what's going on and how much access is there in our communities.
And the older the waitlist record, the less
Correct.
uptake you have on that. So you have our resource referral agencies working on very old records that, folks may have moved, they have changed jobs, they're no longer eligible. So that's sort of what I was saying is like when the data was fresh, we were able to get people into the system quickly. So I think that's a balance we're going to have to figure out how to strike in the new system.
Yeah, I mean, this is why we did the waitlist remediation project, was to ensure that the folks who were on there, that we did some outreach and to ensure that they're updating their records and that we're really educating families when we're adding a family to the waitlist. We've really been saying, hey, make sure you're educating them. Like if you move, if circumstances changes, please call to update while we're in this process before the system is actually modernized to be able to do some of the work or to allow families to be able to update their own record, right? Future state, it would be the families have access to update their record accordingly, right? The way that some of us are able to do through our healthcare portals and those sorts of things to be able to
Online
update
banking.
it yourselves. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Current system doesn't allow us a lot of flexibility, which you're familiar with, Maria, to an extent. And it's also like other factors too that impact the wait list as, like priorities and other things. So the querying of families on the wait list is something that we hope will improve over time.
I mean, additionally, contract providers help a little bit in terms of the remediation of the wait list, because contracted providers call in families based on region or age or,
City, town.
they have different queries from the wait list that may move people differently, and make it shorter. So when contracts open up, basically you have to fill a certain classroom, but you can only get children a certain age, for example. So it's not always by the order in which he was entered.
You
great
guys, but
segue.
it's such a great segue.
That's great.
That's why
Great.
contracts are important
Yes.
and an essential part of child care financial assistance. So afternoon, Chair, Secretary, Commissioner, and board members. I'm Tyrese Nicholas, Deputy Commissioner for Family Access and Engagement. I'm happy to be able to provide an update on our contracted provider procurement. As the Commissioner said in her opening, we administer child care financial assistance in 2 different ways, either through vouchers, which are portable, or through our contracted seats, which are for a particular seat and a program. And that program could be a center-based program or a family child care home, right? A family child care home or family child care educator that's connected to what we call a family child care center system. What is important about contracts, it allows families within the community to access a program in their community. And it also gives families on the wait list a different level of access. So as the commissioner shared, where we're at with our caseload, we're not able to offer funding to families off the wait list. And that, yes, we are, and no, we're not in some ways, right? For vouchers, no, but for contracted seats, we possibly can, because a contracted seat is for a particular seat type, right? And that seat type is based off of a child's age. And what the services that they need, whether they're income eligible or one of our priority populations of families experiencing homelessness, working with the Department of Children and Families, or parents under 24. And so the way that families access a contracted seat is the contracted provider will be looking for a family that meets the need of the seats that they have available. And so currently, given where we're at, with family access, right now contracted seats is a way for some families to be able to access care. And we're through this procurement, we were really focusing on, families that have the highest needs and that really need a holistic support. And that's what we're doing through these contracts. Our main goals were really to and you'll hear us talk about our overall agency goals is really we want to prioritize families, and we want to center around the family's experience and how they're moving through the system, making it easier, modernizing our system, and also increasing our overall efficiency, right? And we feel that contracts is one of the ways that we were able to do it. We were very intentional through this procurement to really buy what we want. Right? And what we want is a holistic approach to working with not just the child, but the entire family, right? The entire family. And that's ensuring that there are access to supports within the program, and the program can support the family in the actual community, right? What we heard from many of our providers through our visioning sessions was the importance of the work that they're already doing. And we feel like this procurement gave our contracted providers, new and old, new and existing, an opportunity to truly show us that based off the way that we outlined the procurement. So what I'm going to show you is very high level. What was the outcome? So our overall overview and our goals were to really improve customer service for our families, strengthen and align educator requirements, right? And how are we supporting our educators? How are we supporting our administrative staff as it connects to an overall umbrella agency? And then how are we as EEC supporting our contracted providers and improving performance and monitoring? And then what are we looking at in the way that we're administering supports, financial supports that are closer to the cost of care? Through this procurement, we were able to institute an administrative payment for our center-based providers, which in our former contract we did not. And so we implemented a 5% administrative payment, recognizing the administrative supports and works that's required to actually administer the contracts, right? Part of the core services in the contracts is eligibility determination for child care financial assistance, as well as family engagement, social and behavioral health supports, as well as access to transportation. Through this procurement, we were able to decouple our transportation supports and give each child in each program the reimbursement for one-way or two-way transportation, which was in the previous contract coupled within the rate. So we decoupled it, recognizing that transportation is a critical support that is needed, and it also could be costly to the providers. So as I said earlier, this procurement it consists of two contracts. So it's our income eligible families. So those are our families that are meeting the income eligibility for child care financial assistance. And then we have our priority populations families with our families who are experiencing homelessness, and that means they're either in a shelter or they're meeting the McKinney-Vento definition of homeless. And we have also our parents under 24. our timeline for this procurement, we kicked off with stakeholder engagement. EEC is committed to listening and hearing the feedback of all the folks that we work with. And so we started doing that, I would say, over 18 months ago. We opened up the procurement in March. We went through training folks. We had over 80 reviewers from across different state agencies, including DTA, DCF, Department of Public Health. We did our bid notifications August 23rd, and since September, we were actively in contract negotiations up until probably last week or so, right? And where we're at now is we have started the contract execution and activation. It has been, I'm going to steal your words, Commissioner, a lumpy and bumpy road. We have not reprocured these contracts in 15 years. I have been here almost 2 years, so that means I have never done these contracts, and many of us haven't, right? So it has been a learning journey for all of us. We have learned so much, and we have said to all of our providers, all of our bidders, we're in this with you. We're all going to figure it out together, but we want to make sure, I shouldn't say but, and also we want to make sure that we get it right and we're intentional in the way that we're doing it. Right, and just be on the journey with us. So where we're at today is we're right into contract orientation, moving to contract orientation and training. We're in the process of finalizing contracts, making any necessary amendments, which has taken a while. We have 110 providers across both of the contracts, and that equates to over 110 contracts and over 400 budgets, just to give some context. I can't stop. I have to stop and thank the entire EEC team across the agency that have been actively working on this procurement, our fiscal team, our project management team, the family access team, the workforce team, and program quality. When I say this procurement has touched every part of our agency, it truly has. It has pushed us to learn more and more and to really prioritize the way that we're going to do this moving forward. So some things look one way right now, and we know that it's going to take time for it to shift as it is a new contract. So what is the outcome? 116 individual organizations submitted 196 bids across the income eligible and the priority populations contracts. We awarded 106 organizations contracts for income eligible, 77 for Department of Children and Families, 41 for families experiencing homelessness, and 28 for our young parents, or as we call them, parents under 24. And what you can see on the right side is that equates to 74 organizations that are center-based, 26 that are center-based and family child care systems, and 10 organizations that are family child care systems only. I just gotta take a deep breath for a sec. A lot of work. A lot of work from the organizations who are applying, and a lot of work from the teams that were moving us through the procurement. I'm happy to say that if you see here, 67% of the organizations serve more than one of the populations. So that means some of them are income eligible in all of the priority populations, and some of them are income eligible in one or the other from the other side. We have 8 organizations that are brand new to EEC, meaning this is their first time. So for many providers, for this 8, they've been waiting. Right? They've been waiting 15 years. And so now we're happy to onboard new providers. We've been meeting with the new providers over the last week to get to know who they are, one-on-one meetings. We're committed to tell us who you are, what does your structure look like, what do you need from EEC, what do you need from us, so that we can ensure that the onboarding process, especially for our new providers, is personal for them and they feel that they have our 100% support. So I'm going to go through the next couple of slides. I won't spend a lot of time there, but this is just the breakdown by the different populations from the contract. So for income eligible, these two slides show you the seats that were requested by the organization. So they requested X number of seats and they were awarded X number of seats, right? So for income eligible, we had a total of 20,133 seats that were requested, and we awarded 12,506. So on the left, you'll see the seats requested, awarded by region, and on the right, you'll see the awarded seats by the age group. So your center-based, infant, toddler, preschool, family child care system, under and over 2. What's key to note here is that we had targets. We had targets based on the total number of seats that we estimated to award. The current landscape looks a lot different in 2024 than it did in 2019. In 2019, in 2009. In 2009, the procurement, the total was half of what it is now, right? So we awarded $402 million. It was $204 million back in 2009. So the cost of a seat in 2009 and today it's doubled, right? It's doubled. And so through this procurement, we didn't really have an opportunity to increase seats. For some providers, they saw an increase maybe in infant and toddlers, and they may have seen a slight decrease in their school age and maybe preschool. Next slide is DCF, same seats requested versus awarded. There was a total requested for DCF of 6,998. We awarded 5,166. And on the right, it's again broken down by seat type, age type. You'll see seats by the age group. And please stop me if there are any questions. And next, we have our families experiencing homelessness. Here, you'll see it looks almost equal, right? What was requested was also awarded, and this was because what we did through this procurement included an analysis and research. And Massachusetts, we know we're in a homeless family crisis, and so through these contracts, there was the need, and so we're trying our best to meet the need for our homeless families, and they are a priority population for our contracts as well as for our vouchers. And so you'll see here where the requested align more to what was awarded. So for our families experiencing homelessness, requested was a total of 1,020 seats, and we awarded 973. And then lastly, our young parents, or our parents under 24, we awarded the total requested was 496 and the total awarded was 354. We know that research tells us that teen pregnancy is down. And so here in our previous contracts, I have to get used to saying previous because we're in the new. In our previous contracts, we had underutilization for our parents of under 24, and the targets for our parents under 24 were a bit lower than what they were in 2009. So here we awarded 354. And so here's the procurement summary numbers of what was awarded in 2009 versus what was awarded currently. And so you'll see we're just at about 19,000 for currently awarded, and in 2009 we were at around 20,447. What is not on this slide is what we call flex pool. Flex pool is what we call continuity of care for any child that's in a contracted seat as they age up, or as they age up or they move from one program to another. For our income eligible contracted seats, which would be income eligible includes young parents or parents under 24 and our families experiencing homelessness, they have up to 5%, a 5% increase for continuity of care purposes for the flex pool. So that means they can enroll up to 5%. So that could increase.
5% above their contract award.
Yes.
So if they received 100 seats, they can enroll 5% above that, and sometimes more with approval, if for the purposes of continuity care. So a sibling or an infant that's aging up or a toddler that's aging up where they don't have a contract seat. So again, the priority is making sure no kid loses access to care and there's stability at the program level. So we have this flex pool opportunity where, and starting with the contracts, the flex pool is is available to them, all of the 5%.
The 5%, and if they're over 5%, then they would be transferred to a voucher. So they will never lose access to their child care financial assistance, right? We keep them on continuity of care. For our DCF children, there's not, the 5% doesn't apply to them. We look at what is the need, and we work with DCF around ensuring that those children that need the supports of the DCF seat, because the supports for the DCF seat include coordination of services, a social worker, and we'll work with DCF to enroll those children there. Currently, we have about 1,900 DCF children in the DCF Flex Pool. So those numbers aren't counted in the awarded.
So
for DCF.
what that means is that it may look like we're below, but we're really at. And if you go back to slide 38, what you'll see is the total number of kids that are in contracts in July was about 20,071, which is about where we are if you count the kids that are in the current flex pool. So again, and one of the things we didn't mention is that we had some bidders who were not successful or some bidders who did not bid for this particular. So for children who are in those seats, they will all receive a voucher so that they can maintain access to child care financial assistance, which is an additional dynamic variable in the caseload, because they will go from contract into the voucher caseload while we continue to serve about 20,000, a little bit more than 20,000 families through the contracts and the mechanisms.
Yeah, and they won't have to do anything. We were able to do that through a system migration. So they've actually already transferred from the contract seats to vouchers.
Like, that worked.
It worked. It worked. It took us some time, but it worked. It worked. So we have been actively working through a system migration to move the child, like it's a brand new contract. So there were things in our CCFA system that had to happen. And so that took a couple of days for the system to catch up. Right, and so part of that was anyone who lost a contract or their award was less than their current utilization, those contracted seats switched over into vouchers, and we wanted to ensure minimal disruption to any family. So we did our best to ensure that it went through the system. Did it all work perfectly? I'm pretty sure we'll find out it didn't, but we'll be working actively to make sure we make everyone whole through the process. And then this last slide is just like a summary of the services, right? The summary of the services, like we defined clear customer service expectations that we are expecting of the providers, what the providers should expect to receive from EEC as support. We included staffing expectations. We have staffing expectations for our income eligible, and we have staffing expectations for our priority populations. Like, minimally, you have to have someone who can handle the admin support, someone who can support the family through some level of case coordination, and then how are you supporting your staff, right? We're very intentional here, our program quality team, to call out continuous quality improvements and how do we work collaboratively with the programs to ensure that. How do we support them and their educators and ensuring that they have what they need as they're supporting our families with the highest needs. We are, of course, including KPIs. We're going to be working on KPIs through this procurement. You'll hear us talk about KPIs through probably most of our contracts moving forward. I already talked about transportation as a critical support, it being decoupled. And then the biggest change is that we will not be waiting another 15 years to do this again. So we have flexibility within the procurement to reopen it annually. And so what it looks like, it's a 3-year term with the option to renew annual. So 7 years, but we can renew every year in between. And then I'm going to end with what EEC's commitment is. And our commitment through this procurement is to work collaboratively and in partnership with all of our providers and doing it together. That means we are sure there are things we may have missed or we didn't get right. We're going to work together with the providers and figuring it out, and we're going to support them through a collaborative monitoring approach that will include all the partners within EC. That's all our divisions that work through this procurement working together. Tomorrow we're having a kickoff orientation where we're just saying, hi, welcome, here's what's next. We know it's been lumpy and bumpy. Here's the current status. And then we'll be kicking off in our first in-person regional sessions where we're going to get to meet everyone, and they're gonna get to meet all of the EEC team at the end of October. So we're hoping to get through this with the providers, and we're thinking our onboarding and training plan will run between October and December so that we can get it right and get folks onboarded as quickly as we can.
I have a quick question. So for the families experiencing homelessness, do we have a general understanding of the reasons why we weren't able to fund those at 100? And then what are we learning about the types of supports that are needed so that we could reach that threshold in the future?
So we had targets. We had 20, we initially had targets for the estimated number of seats. So we estimated 20,000 seats, and that 20,000 seats was allocated between income eligible and priority populations. And then there were set targets based on the analysis. And so the number was the target number. And in some instances, we went over the number based off the need and what we have learned. And also through contract negotiations, we allow providers who are providing those services to tell us what they're experiencing. What we're learning about the homeless population, we're learning because we're a part of many working groups. So you have a number of interagency state and community organizations that are on task force trying to figure it out for our homeless families. What we're hearing is they need full supports. And some of our homeless families are actually not. Their children, because of their journey here, they're not necessarily ready to participate in formalized care. And so we've been taking a holistic approach, looking at other supports. So our coordinated family and community engagement grantees, they received additional funding, and they were going right into the families to provide supports to help them. For those who were ready, connecting them to the CCRNRs, the CCRNRs going right to them, and then working in the community around what are those social and behavioral supports that the entire family would need to support them. Some families coming from other countries, formalized childcare is not something that they're comfortable with, and so they have to get acclimated to it so that they can enroll in programs. And so we're actively working across the working groups to better understand, and our hope is where we would need to make adjustments, eventually we would, if we have, subject to funding appropriation.
We also had a budget for
Yeah.
the procurement that, so balancing sort of what people requested, what our targets were by region and population, and staying within the budget. So it was a big balancing act for the team. But I think we obviously wanted to make sure, and we think contracts, because you can build these additional supports around, are particularly important for our priority population, so families experiencing homelessness as well as those working with DCF and young parents. So
Tyrese, I just want to say how much we at DCF appreciate that we continue to be a priority population. We've talked about the fact that we've made a push at DCF, we've hired more staff. We want to continue to take advantage of this benefit, so thank you.
Thank you. And we're looking forward to, working even closely. The DCF has childcare coordinators, which was huge.
Yes.
Right? And that's partly why
really
we've seen the increase. So we know that all DCF children that need access to childcare, we know that they're most likely getting it now. And so we have some work ahead of us, and we'll be working even more closely with between our family access regional specialists. Are going to be working closely with the DCF regional childcare coordinators.
let me just reiterate that we, in the last 2 months, how long have they been here, hired a brand new position to the agency under Tyrese's team, so 5 family access coordinators who are essentially barrier busters. And so they got jumped right into this procurement, which is, their job is really to work with our providers, with other state agencies, DCF, with the shelters, and with other folks within the region to make sure families have access to the care that they need. And so they are leading a lot of the local efforts around helping support the implementation and adoption of the procurement. So
many providers have already met them. We have one in the room. Onika Jenkins is here. You can wave, Onika.
For our region.
So they have jumped right in. So they have been the ones communicating with the providers around budgets and other questions. And so they're an awesome team. We're happy to have them. And they're excited to, they're ready to do the fun work, right? They think it's going to be the work that they enjoy the most is being able to really bust those barriers.
So I want to thank Tyrese for her leadership and her whole team. But as Tyrese said, there really isn't one corner of the agency that this procurement didn't touch in one way or another. So I want to extend my gratitude to everyone who participated. But the other group that has been burning the midnight oil on this is the fiscal and procurement teams under Catherine. So Sandy Fortier-Hollow, David Minucci, who's our director of procurement, Crystal Lanton, our budget director, Paul Ward, who's our budget analyst. Long weekends and late nights trying to get to the Barbara Boyd. The whole fiscal and contracts team, I think they are very happy that we have re-procured this after 15 years. They've been sitting over there with the risk and anxiously awaiting it to happen. But it has been an enormous amount of work for your team too, Catherine. So thank you for that, and each of them for their work. Yeah.
Yeah, we have an awesome team, I have to say, though. This is the biggest. I've been in state government for over 20 years, and I've done a lot of procurements, but this one was epic, is what I'll say.
Any other questions or comments on the board?
Quick question. I think there's a lot that we can learn, actually, from this, because it's such a huge effort. Is there anything we can learn with regards to providers? Because I know there's a number of providers that we're currently participating in CCFA that did not apply. Is there anything we can learn from that so that the next time this procurement happens, which hopefully, like you said, it will be at a reasonable time, we can increase the number of providers, willing to participate? And how many was that? I cannot remember. I know we talked about that, but I cannot remember.
How many
current providers active in 2024 did not apply?
So there were a number. So what I can share what we know. We know there was around about maybe close to 40 providers that either decided they weren't going to reapply, or they may have missed a deadline, or they were unaware that they had to. Right. And so what we have been learning from the ones that we have talked to is just around what other outreach efforts we may partake in. We did a lot of outreach for this re-procurement. We had visioning sessions, a RFI. We talked about it at our boards, our workforce, our advisories. We had mandatory trainings. Everywhere we thought we could speak about it, we did. One thing I have heard from a few of the providers we did speak to is ones who made the option not to reapply, I think is, they were thinking about their current capacity and the shifts within their own organizations, and they wanted to be able to do it well. And so I respect those providers who say, I don't have the staffing capacity to be able to support what is being asked of us through this procurement. And we have others who say, I'm coming back in next time. Right. And so they're hopeful. We've asked folks to ensure, make sure all your information's up to date on ComBuys. Make sure you're connected to the right commodity codes so that I believe in ensuring that people are educated around what the resources are. Right. And we know that procurements are hard for those of us who even know how to do them. And so just thinking about how do we, as an agency or as the Commonwealth, right, how do we ensure equitable access to all providers, especially those smaller providers in our communities, to ensure they know how to apply and how to stay engaged. And also, honestly, I think, we now have regional folks, and those regional folks aren't just going to be working with providers that have contracts with us. They're going to be in the regions, are part of the meetings, right? A part of the local regional meetings. And so there'll be people that will be able to talk about it in a different way that we didn't have throughout this procurement. And so I'm hoping, Maria, that it will look a lot different and people will feel that they know it's coming.
Thank you.
Yeah.
A lot of opportunity for learning too everywhere, pretty much.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I just want to say thank you, Tyrese, for the follow-up and the transparency. Last meeting, I asked for some data so that we could follow along, and this is in here, so I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tyrese.
Thank you.
So that brings us to the end of our meeting today. I just want to thank Renee and the team here in Quincy for sharing your space with us and for the warm welcome. Please extend our thanks to the extended team who I know have been working hard all day listening to us, and so thank you. And at this time, I'd like to make a motion to adjourn the meeting. Can I have a second?
Second.
Carolyn, thank you. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Meeting is adjourned. We will see you in Boston next month.
Yes, back in Boston.